Another week, another Penn State show here on DK Sports Radio. This is a welcome from your host, as always, Penn State beat writer Audrey Snyder. And this is the Coach's Caravan edition. As I record this, I am doing so in my parents' basement. Yes, this is exactly what's happening today as I make a quick stop at home in Downingtown between the New York stop on Tuesday and the Philadelphia stop, which I will head to Wednesday evening. So I'll have plenty of coverage off of both of those, but back in the basement, not exactly how you envision it, but it is a very nice basement. So hope the acoustics are okay where I'm coming to you from today. But, this week, I always find the Coach's Caravan to be one of the more interesting undertakings that Penn State does. Now, I had a story up on the site earlier this week about how the Caravan has kind of evolved. And, of course, this thing started out of necessity, really, when Bill O'Brien was there. And you look at it, that's when Penn State was at its worst point. That was right after the Jerry Sandusky child sexual abuse scandal. I believe it was actually the summer before the trial started, perhaps, that they started it, or maybe it was the following year. Either way, it started in a big way with 18 stops. So Bill O'Brien was all over not only the tri-state area, but seemingly everywhere in between. I mean, they really stretched this caravan out, and this year, as they've evolved, as Penn State has returned, as the Nittany Lions have won, everything's returned back to normal. And I think you can sense that when you look at the caravan this year, where there are only 3 stops. This one's a very manageable one this year, both from the coaches that are on it. They're pleased that it's only 3 stops, but also for the reporters. We don't have to trail this thing for 18 stops, where some of those, maybe it meant 9 days, maybe it meant 11 days, just kind of depending how it worked out. But this year, 3 days, 3 stops, pretty simple. It'll wrap up Thursday night in Washington, D.C. So the cool thing for us as reporters is that James Franklin meets with the media at every single stop. So that means, he talked Tuesday in New York City with a really excellent view of the skyline behind us, and some ballroom in a hotel was pretty cool. He'll talk Wednesday night in Philadelphia downtown, and then they'll be somewhere in D.C. But what's really neat about this is that when they talk, because again, it's May here, there's not going to be much breaking news that comes out of this, although there were a few items that I'll get to in the second part of the show. But the cool thing is you never really know where the conversations are going to go. So yesterday in New York, Franklin was asked about Saquon Barkley, of course, being drafted by the Giants. You had to assume that there would be some draft talk because of being in New York and with Barkley going number 2 overall to the Giants. And part of that then morphed into, which seems like has always happened every year during the caravan, at least when James Franklin has been here, is some question, or maybe make the argument some plea about facilities and potential facility upgrades. That's how the caravan ended Tuesday in New York, where James Franklin said that Penn State, while they've made progress on the facility front in terms of specifically football-specific spending, so football capital spending, in the past 8 years, when you look at that, which Franklin said, and Sandy Barber backed that when she spoke after him Tuesday night, said that they've done a study over the past 8 years, and that within that study, in terms of football-specific spending, Penn State is ranked 13 out of 14 Big Ten programs. And that, they say that, and you hear that, and you think, wow, that's pretty startling. But you look at everything that Penn State has done since, this new leadership has been here, since Franklin and Barber and Eric Barron have been in place together, this new regime. And you still have to remember that while the sanctions are long gone and they've moved past that, everything that happened during that time frame, it just doesn't get erased and changed overnight. And I think that's part of what you're seeing now. I think it's also the fact that Franklin highlighted that, hey, 10 years prior to this, Penn State wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot in terms of renovations, especially over in the Lash building in Holuba Hall, in terms of keeping those facilities up to date, which I think anybody who's looked at facilities around the country, especially different football facilities, you compare that to what Penn State has, and it's pretty obvious that this program's been lagging behind. And people say, well, how did they get here? Well, I mean, if you look at it, 10 years ago, okay, that's 10 years ago, Joe Paterno was the head coach. This was a Penn State, I think you look in their weight room compared to what it used to be to what it was now. These guys had machines in there. I know at one point when Bill O'Brien got there, he made reference to the fact that even the film that the coaches were watching, that they had to go over and digitalize all of that and change it over, that it was just very old school, very outdated. And Franklin mentioned, again, during the New York stop, that they have carpets in the Lash building that haven't been, changed over in 20 years. So I feel like every year during the Caravan, we hear it about facilities, but when you put it that way, when they're 13 out of 14 in terms of football-specific spending, with only Rutgers behind them, that's an area where you say, you know what, Penn State really has to step it up. And keep in mind, in terms of football-specific spending, that also includes assistant coaching salaries. So that's something that a lot of people just think of and they say, okay, well, they've got these nice fancy curtains in Haluba Hall, which Penn State did add this white perimeter around the indoor practice facility, which I'm sure probably cost a pretty penny when you look and you say, well, it just looks like some white drapes with logos on it. Well, all that stuff is pretty pricey and adds up, but there's so many other elements to it. And Sandy Barber said, yes, this isn't a surprise to her where Penn State came in this study, but she did say that they know what they have to do, and it's pretty simple. They have to raise more money. Well, that's always easier said than done, but that is one component of the Caravan, and it's also why I'm sure we hear this every year during the Caravan, because it's basically, James Franklin speaking right to the fans and potential donors and program supporters and saying, hey, Penn State still, they're winning now. This thing's turned around on the field, but there's still areas where they're lagging behind, and hey, don't look around the rest of the Big Ten, expect them to hit the pause button and wait for Penn State to catch up. That certainly will not be the case. When we come back here on the Penn State Show on DK Sports Radio, I will dig into some of the news and developments of the week because, well, there have been a few when we come back here on the Penn State Show on DK Sports Radio.
Miller Lite is the original light beer, and we'll always brew it to have more taste, with only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs. Because we believe that if you compromise on taste, you can taste the compromise. Miller Lite. Hold true.
Great beer, great responsibility. 2018 Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Average analysis, 12 fluid ounces. Less than 1 gram protein, 0 grams fat.
If you're one of the thousands of Western Pennsylvanians who love to get outdoors, then you need to check out this cool new website, stepoutside.org. Learn where, when, and how you can go camping, hiking, or hunting, or take part in power sports, shooting sports, or water sports in your local community or across the country at stepoutside.org, where everything you need to know is just a click away. That's stepoutside.org.
What I want from my public accounting firm is big ideas.
But I don't want to lose the personal attention.
My company needs global capabilities.
From a firm with local ownership.
And I want to work with industry experts.
Who take the time to understand my unique challenges. And that's what sets Snyder Downs apart. Expertise for the most complex business issues. With the service you need every day. To learn how our big thinking with a personal focus can help your company, visit SnyderDowns.com.
Injured in an accident? Need assistance in preserving your business's interests? Let the attorneys at Bassey, Vreeland & Associates protect your legal rights. For over 65 years, Bassey, Vreeland & Associates has been representing the citizens and businesses of southwestern Pennsylvania. With offices strategically located in Washington and Charleroi, Bassey, Vreeland & Associates can deliver results for you throughout the Pittsburgh area. Visit www.bmvlaw.com or call 724-228-7000 to see how Bassey, Vreeland & Associates can meet your legal needs. Bassey, Vreeland & Associates. We fight, we care, we win.
Welcome back to the Penn State Show here on DK Sports Radio. As always, I am your host, Audrey Snyder, and the news of the week for the Nittany Lions was the fact that Penn State will have, by this weekend, 10 of their 23 2018 signees on campus. So Penn State, of course, had the 6 January early enrollees who wrapped up spring ball, wrapped up their first semester on campus within the last week. But it surfaced this week that Penn State will also get 4 players who will enroll for the first summer session, also known as the May semester. And the significance of that for Penn State is, well, there's a couple things of interest with it, really. And one is that Penn State hasn't gone this route before. James Franklin said that this is the first time that they're going to have players come in for the May semester. And yes, they do expect that this could become a trend because, granted, this means rather than guys getting here like they typically do for summer session 2 in late June, which is when the rest of the freshmen will get here, these 4 enrollees will get an additional 6 weeks. So that means 6 weeks of training with Dwight Galt, which is huge, and it also means they'll get at least one other class out of the way. So you look at, guys getting acclimated to college, both socially and, academically, athletically, and this gives these guys a chance to do it. So quarterback Will Levis will be one of them who will be there, as will tight end Pat Freiermuth, and then defensive lineman P.J. Mustafer and Judge Culpepper. So those are the 4 guys who will be on campus this weekend, starting their college careers. And that gets, 10 of Penn State's 23. And Franklin said that the way this kind of unfolded was that these 4 players, that either their high schools were finished, so in that case, they said, okay, fine, you're graduated, you're cool to early enrollee, we're fine with that. Or some of them worked it out after their with their high schools and said, hey, they really wanted to enroll in January but weren't able to. So then from kind of, when they decided in the winter to this period, they made sure everything was lined up academically that, okay, at this point, if your high school is still in session, you're really only missing probably the final 4 or 5 weeks, which, again, senior year, we all know at that point, the work has basically been done, as James Franklin put it. So this is really advantageous for Penn State, and I think especially when you look at Mustafer and Culpepper, these are 2 guys that I had been saying for a while could potentially factor in. You look at the interior of this defensive line and how they need to have that 2 deep and that 3 deep. Well, again, the farther away you are from the ball, the easier it is to see playing time. So guys in the trenches right away typically don't play. But we have seen it happen on both sides of the ball where Penn State has gotten contributions from younger players, in both trenches. So we'll have to see, if this gives these guys an edge. But no doubt about it, people say, well, what's 6 weeks? What's the benefit? I think it's actually pretty huge when you look at it in terms of, okay, it's 6 weeks, then you pair that with another 6-week summer session rather than, okay, you're here for 6 weeks and then with the way camp is now starting earlier and earlier because of the NCAA calendar, you're looking at Penn State. I don't know the official date yet. It hasn't been announced, but I would imagine first week of camp is going to be the last week of July would be my guess. So you say, okay, you get guys who are on campus for 4.5 weeks, and then they're starting camp right away. That's a really tough turnaround, a really quick turnaround. And then, of course, while Penn State has fall camp, they have finals going on. So this is certainly a benefit, and Franklin expects that this will be a trend. And he said that looking across the country, around the country, that he's seen a lot of schools that have early enrollees as far as double digits. Maybe they have 10 guys who are January enrollees, and that's the number in his mind that he wants Penn State to get to. So we saw 6 this year, which was a sizable group for Penn State. But, maybe that's something to keep an eye on down the road here. Maybe that number gets up to 10 by next year, or perhaps maybe you see, 7 or 8 guys come in January, depending if their schools allow it, if they want to do it. And then you have, maybe another 8, 9, 10 guys who are able to get in for this first summer session, this May semester. So that was really an interesting development, something I know I'll be keeping an eye on here in the coming months, coming recruiting cycles. But on top of that, everyone's favorite talking point and the other news of the week was Pitt-Penn State. Do not look for that series to be extended beyond the 4-year agreement unless this happens. Sandy Barber said Penn State is not looking for this series to be renewed at any point before 2030. Okay, so we're in 2018, and I've heard from fans since I wrote this story Tuesday night, and Barber said 2030, and fans are saying, you know what? this might be the last time, realistically, in their lifetimes that they see Pitt-Penn State, here coming up in these final 2 years of the 4-year agreement. And that, of course, for college football fans, especially for older college football fans, that's sad. I mean, these are fans who, this was a big-time rivalry. I'll admit that they probably, this game means way more to them than it would to somebody my age, my generation, because we didn't grow up on that, people my age. I didn't grow up on Penn State football in general, so really it means nothing to me. But for those Penn State fans who are around my age, I've talked to plenty of them about it. And for us, it was just different. You didn't grow up on that. But for the older fans, I think, this speaks even more to enjoy these last 2 years, and hopefully you'll be around to see this thing if it gets renewed for 2030 beyond that. But enjoy it. I expect that Heinz Field this year is going to be potentially even more wild than it was 2 years ago in the first of the 4-year agreement, of course, when Pitt beat Penn State. We still have not gotten a confirmed start time, at least from Penn State's side of things, and Sandy Barber was asked about that during the coaches' caravan, and she said no, she's not sure when that Pitt-Penn State game, September 8th at Heinz Field, is going to start. However, of course, she did say, which I'm sure many of you will enjoy this, quote, Barber said that she is not sure what the Pirates were doing. She meant that in regards to the Pirates came out, of course, a few weeks ago, moved their game from a night start at PNC Park to an afternoon game on September 8th to say that they could accommodate Pitt-Penn State so they could play under the lights. Well, that's news to Penn State. So again, nothing official on that start time, but with the need to get people in and out of the city over on the North Shore, I just can't envision this playing out any other way. So you have to be thinking a night game, and I think especially at this point now that there's been a potential date set out there of, okay, after this thing finishes up here in the following season, so 2 more games out of the 4 to go, don't look for this thing again then until 2030 at the earliest. So all the more reason to look forward to September, to enjoy it even more, because, hey, who knows where it's going to go? Future scheduling, yes, is done so far in advance. But again, as I've said all along, Pitt-Penn State, this wasn't going to be some kind of long-term agreement. Penn State didn't want it to be that way. Penn State, with the 9 conference games, with the scheduling philosophies, they were not willing to go this route. And so there we have it, 2030. Who knows where all of us will be by then? We will have to see. But I'll have plenty of coverage coming up the rest of the week from the Coaches Caravan and some other stuff I am digging into. And then the podcast will have a break next week. I will be going on vacation, so heading to the Caribbean for a week, which I hope will be splendid and beautiful and mid-80s and all those fun sorts of things. But I'll be sure to catch up then after that, and we will see what the rest of the off-season brings here. But until then, this has been Audrey Snyder on DK Sports Radio. Take care.